Hello everybody, it's Murray here and welcome back to my channel. On today's easy sunset acrylic painting tutorial for beginners, we're going to learn how to paint this painting step by step. I'm going to teach you how to paint a outline really easily and what colours to use, how to use different types of brushes to blend, and how to create an underpainting of a sunset sky. So then you can paint your clouds really easily over the top using warm and cool colours, how to use brushes to make them look super realistic really easily, how to use different shadows to make things look far away or close to the viewer, and then how to put highlights over the top to make your work look really realistic with really little effort, so you can paint this gorgeous sunset acrylic landscape painting. So let's get into it. So a really nice easy tutorial today. We're going to use the following colours. They are titanium white, cad yellow, cad orange, rose pink, earth green, cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, dioxane purple, burnt umber brown and black. I've used a 10 by 12 inch just canvas board, and all I'm doing, I'm just using a bright blue to block in where I'm going to have a road. We're going to have two big trees either side. We're going to have a sort of farm like fields in the background, and then we're going to have a sunset sky. Now the reason I'm using blue is because it's really good to have a dark colour as your background, so you can sort of trace and colour everything in. And the reason I'm using orange and not blue in the sky is because our sunset is going to be very bright and we're going to use pastel colours in the sky. So I don't want to use a dark colour for things like a nice pastel sunset sky. So that's why I've used orange, because once you've created the outline, you can always dry your work and then you can just paint over it and colour it in. So it's really easy. So we've got half the sky as sort of warm, and that's going to be our sunset, and that's going to be the orange. And then we've got our cool colours for all our nearer things in blue. So we've got kind of a divide. So we've got this nice pastel sunset we're going to paint, and we can paint over our clouds, we can paint everything in and colour in, and then we're going to have some fields off in the background that we're going to push far away, and we can even have a little bit of heat shining on them to look like the glow from the sun. We're going to have some far off trees in the distance, and then we're going to have two big trees either side to sort of frame the viewer to look down the middle. We're going to have some grass, which I'm going to teach you how to paint, and sort of a stony grass road in the middle. And again, everything's going to kind of point towards the sun. So all our sort of road, all our things like our clouds and our trees are going to kind of push you towards the middle of the painting to look towards the sunset. So that's how we're going to sort of plan it. So if you want to, copy the outline and pause the video, and you can just copy it down. Just try roughly to get it how you want it, and we'll start. So all we're going to do, we're just going to mix some orange and some cad yellow. So some bright yellow and some bright orange together. And you should get like a peach colour, sort of a bright sort of tangerine sort of colour. And because it's really bright, we want to make it a little bit less harsh. So we're going to make two shades. We're going to get a little less orange and just more yellow. So we've got one that's kind of peachy and one that's more yellow. So we're just going to mix two piles, look, one bit more orange and one bit more yellow. And all we're going to do is we're going to put lots and lots of white into both of them. Because they're really bright, we want to make them more pastel. So we're going to add lots and lots of white. You probably have to add a couple of dollops of white to make them pastel. And then once you've got the shade, all I want you to do is just create a circle and just paint around it. Now the circle, the reason we're leaving a little white gap is that's going to be our sun. And all I'm doing is I'm just taking the more yellow of the two shades, and just around the sun I'm just blocking it in. Now I've got it slightly fast forward. I'll put the speed back down to be slower for everyone when I'm doing anything technical. But all I'm doing, look, I'm just colouring in an area. Now the great thing is if you've dried your painting before you start, look, you can just paint over all your outline. And it's almost like a colouring book. So look, I can just get the dark colour now. And then further away from the sun, it's going to be a little bit darker. So these areas are going to be less yellow and more orangey. And I'm just going to fill it in. Now I'm very lazy, and I was just wanting to show you, look, if I want to, I can just paint over my clouds. There's no bother. but I can still see that outline. So that's the great thing of drawing an outline first. If you have these colours underneath, look, you can still see them. But that's why I was saying to you, please have orange or a lighter colour on your sky, because even though you can see them, you don't want something like black or really dark blue, because it won't look right on a really nice orangey yellow sky. It will look a bit weird. But the great thing is you can use blue for things like your grass and all your fields, because they're going to be green and we're going to block them in. So I'll slow the video back down now, look, and we'll get some pink. Now all this colour is just pink with lots and lots of white in it. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to mix it into our orange and yellow. So all you do is you just get pink, orange, yellow and loads of white. Loads and loads and loads of white. And all we're going to do is just between, look, the orange and yellow, we're going to create like a buffer zone. Because we want to have blue, purpley sort of colours at the top, like cooler colours. But we don't want to kind of get green. So what we're going to do, we're going to create this sort of buffer zone. And all I'm doing, look, I'm just gently blending it with my finger. You can use your brush, but I just want to show you how easy this is. So I'm just going to use my finger. All you have to do is just block in an area and sort of just roughly blend it in. And the reason we blend it is when you look at a sky, especially a sunset, you don't notice the change from one colour to another. Like, nature is absolutely perfect. So to make your work look really realistic, a lot of the time it's just learning how to blend and trying to make sure that these transitions between one colour and another, so think if you went from orange to yellow or pink to orange, you just want the transitions so there's no jump, so it looks really realistic. So previously, I'm a bit lazy and I like to have colours that are pre-mixed. So we want to go from a warm colour like orange and yellow to a cool colour like blue. So what we're going to do is we're going to make two colours that I've got here at the top, a pastel blue and a darker blue, these two. And I'm going to show you how to make them. Now I've bought them pre-mixed, but I'm going to teach you how to make them because I appreciate not everyone has access to all the colours and not everyone can afford loads of paints. So to make them, all we do, look, is you get cerulean blue and ultramarine blue. So a light blue and a dark blue and loads of white. So cerulean blue, ultramarine blue and loads of white to make it more pastel. To get the darker of the two shades, you just add less white and a little bit of purple. Look, if you add a little bit of purple, it cools it down. And all you do is you just add as much white as you want to make it dark or light. So the shade that's at the top right, that's just not got that much white. Look, that's got about that much white in it. And the lighter shade has just got more white in it. That's all it is. Really, really easy. So look, you can buy them pre-mixed if you're like me and you have to paint all the time. So you've got lots and lots of paint to do, so it saves you time mixing. But as I say, you can just mix them. So look, all we're going to do, we're going to get a pile of our light blue and a pile of our light pink. So all it is pink, loads and loads of white, and then cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, a dot of purple, and loads of white. And we're just mixing an in-between. So think of yin and yang. We've got a really cool colour in the blues and purples. And then we've got a warmer colour, an opposite in the pinks. And we want to kind of meet in the middle. We don't want to have this super jump. So all we're going to do, look, is create this sort of pastel, sort of, it's like a lilac colour, like a lavender. Because it's got a bit of pink in it, but it's warm. And then it's got a bit of cool in it, which is blue and purple. And we're kind of making the in-between. And all I'm going to do, look, I'm just going to block around my clouds and just try to cover as much canvas as I can. So what we're doing, if you think about it, we're creating the sky. So we're going right to the back of the painting, if you think of it. And then we're going to put all the clouds over the top. So firstly, we just want to block everything in. We just want to know where everything's going to be. So this is kind of like, think of building a house. We're laying the foundations. We've got the plans. We know where everything's going to be. We're happy with it. And then all the more technical stuff we can put over the top. So look, there's a big jump, look, between warm and cold. So we want to kind of fix that because look, as a viewer, Your eyes are so cool. They're so perfect. That's what I'm saying. Nature is amazing. That we kind of want to create no jumps in colour. So I'm just going to go back to my previous pink and white. And all I'm going to do, look, I'm just going to try to blend this area. It's a bit lopsided, mine. Look, there's more light seems to be on the right hand side than the left. So what I'm going to do, look, I'm just going to get some pink and white. And I'm just going to extend my sunset a little bit higher, especially on the left. And I'm just going to try and make it look a little bit neater. So what I'm doing at first, look, I'm just blocking in an area. So just covering the canvas. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to start blending it. So let's just block it all in. And then I'm just going to gently blend. Now to blend, all you do is you just ease up on the brush. So think of like if you have a pencil, if you push down really, really hard, I'm just going to add a little bit more orange. You get really dark pencil marks, but if you ease up the pressure, you get nice lighter marks. So all I'm doing the same with my brush. I'm pushing down hard when I want to cover areas like now. Look, I'm pushing down really hard. But when I want to blend, I'm just easing up on the pressure. And I'm just gently blending the colours together. So I'm not pushing down hard, I'm just easing up on the brush. What should happen naturally as well is the brush will run out of paint. And you won't have as much thick paint. And because of that, you'll get like a chalky residue. And then it's really easy to shade. So look, I'll show you my hand. Look, if I hardly touch my hand, look, there's this chalky residue just coming off. It's really, really faint. Can you see that? Because I'm not pushing down hard. I'm just really, really gently rubbing my brush. Look, back and forth, back and forth. And what's happening is that tiny amount of paint is just shading areas. And it should look really, really pretty. So just take your time. If you find the video goes too fast, pause it, go at your own speed. Like we're painting a very technical painting in an hour, but I appreciate not everyone can work at this speed. So go at your own pace, don't be rushed. If you find it's too easy because you're more advanced, you can always fast forward me. That's the joy of YouTube. So what I'm doing, look, I'm just using some of that pink and white at the bottom, and I'm just painting sort of like a misty horizon, just so there's not a harsh horizon. We want it to look far off into the distance. And what we should have, let's get some orange, let's get some yellow and white. What we should have is a glow around the sun, which is more bright, and then everything else is kind of getting cooler. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get some yellow and white and just make a circle where my sun's going to be. And then I'm just going to get some bright cad yellow and I'm just going to go around it and create more of a glow. So if you think the sun is incredibly bright, it's great for a focus point in our painting. So by using our brightest sort of colours around it, we can get you to look towards it. Now the thing with acrylic painting that a lot of people, especially, it's not because they're mean, it's just like the way YouTube is and the way like videos are, a lot of people don't necessarily have talking on their videos. So with the step-by-step ones, you get lots of secret tactics and tips that you might not get on the time-lapse videos. One of the things is sometimes with acrylics, because you're painting over paint, sometimes it doesn't look as bright once it's dried. So say like this white here, look, I'm painting it on. It's kind of mixing, it doesn't look very good. We can always dry it and we can go over it later. And when we put the paint on later, it will look twice as bright simply because it's dry and it's got a second coat of paint. So never worry if your painting looks scruffy or there's bits of brush marks or white canvas showing up. Look, at the moment I'm painting and nothing's happening, it's not really going over. Don't worry, just sort of take your time, dry your work, and you can always come back to it. Look, I can even smudge it with my finger to make it look sort of glowing. But look, I wasn't listening to my own advice, and look, I'm just going over it and over it and over it. And now I'm smudging it. And now I've got a gigantic sun. Look. That looks terrible. It looks like a flying egg or something. A glowing egg. So look, you can always come back to things. Don't worry. If you get the rage like myself, I get the rage. And I sort of don't take my own advice. And I keep trying to do stuff sometimes. I should just leave things alone. But look, as you can see, like we're just going over it. Can you see how much brighter that yellow is? Just going over it twice. Same with shadows. If you go over things twice with dark colours, you can make the areas look darker. You can make things look brighter. So look, we've got this sort of glow. We've got these cooler colours to frame our painting at the top. And we've got this sunset. And now we kind of know where everything's going to be. That's going to be our focus point. That's where we kind of want the viewer to look for. So think of the clouds. Everything around the clouds, around the sun, excuse me, is going to be very warm. And as you go further away from the sun, it's going to be a bit darker. So these clouds around here are going to be bright, and these clouds up at the top of the painting are going to be a bit darker because they're away from the light source. So let's get our yellow and orange and make our peachy colour again. And what we're going to do is the clouds around the sun. Let's add a little bit of our rose pink. The clouds around our sun are going to be incredibly bright and warm in colour because they're right next to the light source. So think of a flame. They're getting really well lit. So all we're going to do, we're going to mix this colour, which is pink, orange and yellow. And it's going to be really, really faint. And these are going to be the clouds that are right next to the sun, just sort of glowing. But as I say, acrylics are deceptive and they dry a bit darker. And because they're water-based, they absorb some of the colour underneath. So can you see now, even the one to the right of the sun is getting darker by the second. It looked really light when I painted it in. But as it dries, they dry darker. So always go a little bit lighter than you think. Sometimes the colour on your palette is not the colour on your painting, which I find most weeks when I do these tutorials. So sometimes you have to go lighter than you think. So let's add some pink, get a little bit darker. And then as we move away from the sun, we're just getting slightly darker. So I'm just adding a bit more pink, less orange and yellow. And don't worry too much about the shapes of your clouds. I'm kind of roughly tracing back into my outline and just colouring in where I kind of drew these clouds in with the orange. But we can always change the shape of our clouds later. I'm going to teach you how to make them look really realistic in a minute. So don't fret. And then again, look, we're going to add more rose pink. So we're getting darker. And now we're going to add a little bit of purple to make it even darker, because purple's a cooler colour. So we're going to get more dark as we move away from the light. So you can see how it's a little bit darker. By adding purple, we've made it a little bit cooler. But it's the same principle. I'm just using a small brush and I'm just pushing down quite hard against the canvas to create sort of shapes of clouds. Now I tend to do a trick where the clouds at the bottom near the horizon, near the sun, they tend to go flat across the painting. And then what I tend to do is have more diagonal ones that go up towards the corners of the painting as they go up in the sky. And that kind of gives the illusion that the world is round and the clouds are sort of following it. And it just looks more realistic. Look, you can even have little breakaway ones. So look, we're just going to create shapes. And we can sort of merge it to the previous colour. Look, just sort of merge areas. So again, look, smudge it with my finger. There's no big jump in colour. It looks like everything is kind of together. And what it should do, what I'm going to do, look, I'm going to put this dark colour here deliberately to show you if you make a mistake, look how easy it is to paint over later. So I'm just going to leave that colour. It's going to not look right because in a minute it's going to get dry dark and it's going to look like a jump. But I want to show you just to show you, like, don't worry if you make a mistake. So let's just block this one in. Because the great thing about acrylics, once they dry, you can just paint over them. So if we make a mistake, we don't like something, Don't fret, just relax. You can always come back. So we're going to have more of this cool purple to make it more darker. So look, that's a nice colour. And then these ones at the top, they're getting very little sun. So they're going to be cooler. To make a really cool purple, like dioxazine or iris purple, whatever you want to call it, you can mix a cool blue. So look, if you imagine my hand, I'm just trying to demonstrate the light coming up from above. The outer side would be in shade. So that's what I was trying to show you with my hand, excuse me. Yeah, to make a cool purple, you can mix colours like pink and things like ultramarine blue or cobalt blue, and you should get a nice cool purple. So if you haven't got it at home, as I say, don't worry, you can always make these colours. So let's block in this one here, and let's do some little shadows on these bits, just so it all interlinks. But can you see now where we've got the underpainting, where we've got that lovely yellow around the sun, we've got the peach colour, and then we've got the lavender underneath, behind these clouds. Now it's starting to trick your eye. So we haven't got any real detail on this painting, but it's kind of looking realistic already, isn't it? So that is the trick. As I say, the great thing about YouTube is you can learn anything for free. So look at that. So we've got this lovely underpainting. Please dry your painting now with a hairdryer, or just have a break for 5 minutes and make yourself a cup of coffee or tea, whatever you drink. So just have a break, because now we've got this all dry. I'm going to show you how to make your sunset clouds. We're going to learn how to paint sunset clouds really, really easily, and how to make them hyper realistic. So look, my canvas, I've dried with a hairdryer. It's totally dry. I'm going to mix some yellow and white, well, some yellow and orange, excuse me. And I'm going to use a really thin brush, like a really tiny brush. And what we're going to do, now we've got the background dry, I'm just going to poke sky holes in my cloud. So first I'm just going to colour this area. I think this area actually needs to be a bit warmer. I think, as I say, it's dried a bit dark. So just by getting some yellow and orange, I'm just going to glaze over the top and make this area look a bit warmer. So as I say, you can always change things about. Look, if you don't like something, look, you can always just colour over the top. The great thing about drying your work in stages, you can add highlights, you can change things about, and if something goes wrong, you can then just use a baby wipe or a wet towel and just wipe it away. But you've still got your painting underneath. So by drying your painting at different stages, that's a good kind of like insurance policy. So all I'm doing, look, I'm using some yellow and orange just to add some highlights. I'm going to add a little bit pink to turn it a bit darker. So yellow, orange and pink. I think we need a bit more of this sort of yellow. Let's make it hotter, and a bit more orange. Let's go for a really vibrant sort of knock your socks off pink. There we go. Look, that's a hot pink. Woohoo. And what we're going to do, look, we're just going to add some areas of like the cloud, like the underbelly of the cloud that's getting some highlights. What I'm going to do, I'm deliberately going to leave some gaps in the dark purple so it looks like texture. Can you see what I'm doing? I'm deliberately leaving some gaps, and then what it should do is make that cloud look more 3D. Look at that. Ha ha! What a cool way to do it. So by adding all the shadows first, so adding that sort of foundation and then putting the highlights on top, look, you can sort of make all the areas naturally look like they're being highlighted by the sun, and also make them look 3D. And in this area, do you remember I said to you I wanted to make it dark to show you it doesn't really work? Look, that bottom one just doesn't work. So look, even a dark colour, look, you can just get some of this lighter shade and just colour it in. So that's what I'm saying to you. If you're at home, you get the rage. I get the rage all the time, trust me. Because the thing with painting, it's really like it's not linear. You have to go back and forth and correct things. Things go wrong all the time. But what's really, really good about that is there's nothing you can't fix. There's nothing you can't go back to. So let's have some highlights and just add some. So I'm trying to work out, look, if the sun is below this sort of tip would be getting the sort of highlights. But as we move more towards the left, there wouldn't be so many over there because that's kind of far away from the sun. So I'm just going to let the paint just gently blend out. Let's just have some little highlights just here on this outer bit. But same principle, this sort of area will be getting some sunlight, but the rest of it wouldn't so much. So I'm just trying to work out where the light would be. So there we go. So now, as I say, we can do the opposite. So think of yin and yang. If we've got really, really lovely highlights, we can even create lovely shadows to emphasize the sort of shade. So by getting purple, pink and orange, we can make that dark color again. Let's add a little bit ultramarine blue to make it a little bit darker. And all I'm going to do is just round the outer edges. I'm just going to put a harsher shadow and just have a few sort of breakaway clouds. Just so if we've got a highlight one side, we've got a dark side the other side. There we go. So as I say, think of, if you have an up, you've got to have a down. You have a light, you've got to have a dark. Easy peasy, look. And if we create a really harsh outline and we don't like it, as I say, we can always come back later. We can always make them softer, paint over them. But we're just trying to make our clouds look more 3D. Let's have some little breakaway bits. So what I'm doing, look, I'm just creating little splodges next to the clouds so they look all marshmallowy and look like they're breaking off. Look at this, so easy, so cool. It's really effective. So you don't have to be the greatest drawer. I don't even have a reference photo, I'm just doing this out of my head. So look, let's dry our work again. And then let's now do the sky holes. So look, all I'm doing is I'm using a tiny brush and I'm matching the background colour. So this colour was yellow and orange and white, wasn't it? And all I'm doing, look, I'm poking holes. So look, all it is, look, I've mixed up some of the background colour. I've got a tiny brush and I'm poking holes in my clouds. And now I can change the shape of them. I can make them hyper realistic. We've done all the hard work. We've done all the blending. We've done all the transitions. So now, look, you can change the shape of the clouds. Now, don't worry. When you create a big dollop, like a big gap in the cloud, look, I'm going to create a big one here. Look, let's create a big dollop. So let's create some little shapes first. But if you create a dollop and it looks quite dark, it's normally because, again, the previous paint that you've in the cloud that you're painting over is shining through. So hang on, I'll show you what I mean in a minute when I get to an area. I must have been doing all the fine detail here, and I need to do it on a big cloud to show you. So when we come away from these little clouds, it'll be easier to explain. Come on, Murray, go to a big cloud. Let's do this one. So I'm just changing all the shapes. If I don't like a shape, I can just change it up. So now let's get the next colour, which was a bit more pink, wasn't it? It was white and pink and a tiny bit of orange. So let's mix that colour. So what I'm doing, look, I'm matching the sky. So this is what I mean. Look, if you do a big dollop and once it dries, it looks a little bit darker. That's all because the previous cloud that you've painted over was darker. So all you have to do is wait for it to dry and give it a second coat of paint. So look, let's put some gaps in. So look, if you find your dollops look really good at first, but when they dry, they look a bit rubbish. And you can see that the colour, look, like here, look, see? I can just go over it again don't worry if you have to go over things once or twice. Like, we're doing a really rushed tutorial for beginners, but if I was painting this photorealistic, I would probably take a day doing a painting. I wouldn't be rushing, and all these little secrets that I'm giving you, look, like just putting these little sky holes in, look how realistic it's starting to look now. By just going back and reworking areas, that is the key to like mastery, just taking your time. So look how realistic this is starting to look already. Wow. So as I say, all the hard work in the blending is the really tough bit that you should take your time on. But this bit, this is easy. Look, just putting little blobs, making my clouds look real. Let's do this one. Look at that. Woohoo! So look, it looks super realistic already. And then this area, I still think it's a little bit too bright. So I'm just going to get some of the background colour, that yellow and orange. And I'm just going to hint over these clouds. I'm just going to paint over it. Again, the outline will shine through. So even though I'm painting over it, you'll still see the clouds in a minute once it's dried. But it's trying to just emphasize sunlight kind of bleaches areas. So if you ever see the sun through a tree, it bleaches all the leaves, and the leaves around the sun look kind of orange. Well, it's the same with clouds. It would be bleaching them. It's so powerful. It would be kind of making them look kind of not invisible, but like just sort of into the background. They would look softer. So look, I'm painting over them, but they'll still come back. So look, I'm just glazing over the top. So think of a crayon. I'm just kind of colouring them in over the top. But can you see to the left of my arm, can you see some of the clouds that we've done the sky holes in? They've dried quite dark. Can you see that? So look, if you have to go over them, that's totally normal. As I say, you probably won't be told this, but I'm giving you away secrets. And part of being a really, really good painter, as I say, is just part of being really good at anything is just knowing what things where you have weaknesses, knowing what areas you need to improve, and just trying to do that. So I know, look, these areas need to be improved, so I just want to clean them up. I'm just shading over the top of them. I'm just making all my transitions look less harsh. This area, look, would be getting more bleached. So I'm just colouring over them. Just chilling, having a good time, taking my time. Now, if you find all these useful tips really, really helpful, please like and subscribe. Please, if you've got any ideas for tutorials, put them in the comments below. I'm going to do a lavender field this week, so this is one of the things someone's asked for, so I'm going to do that. So look, these areas have gone a bit dark, like I say. So look, I can get the previous colours for the sky, and we can go over them. Sometimes you might have to go over them once or twice, but look at the difference. Look, if I paint it in again, look at how brighter it is just from doing it twice. See, no one's going to tell you this, are they? Dun dun dun, a secret. And it's really easy. Yeah, so that's my point. Just little things like that. Just common sense things that aren't difficult. If you knew, you'd be like, duh-oh. It's great to know. So look, it looks so much brighter. So as I say, just spending 5 minutes taking a step back from your painting and just noticing areas that you need to refine will make all the difference, I promise you. Yeah, so please like and subscribe to the channel if you do find these tutorials and these tips super helpful. And thank you so much for everyone who already has subscribed. The channel is doing fantastic. All I'm doing here is I'm just blending areas, as I say, that just look a bit scruffy. I'm just trying to tie these two areas together. Yeah, the channel is doing so well. Thank you very much. It's growing at a really quick rate now. We've got, I think, 170 tutorials now, step by step. Beginner tutorials, that you can binge on. I've created all these playlists for everyone. So there's all different subjects from sunsets to water to forests that you can all binge on if you want to learn. And as I say, look at this, look. So the sunset was the hardest part of the tutorial. So well done everyone for getting this far. That is the hardest bit. Everything from now is easy peasy. So we're going to paint in these faraway fields, and I'm going to teach you how to use colours to make them look far off into the distance. So I'm going to teach you how to do that, and then we're going to get lighter around the sun, because obviously it's very bright, just like our clouds. So look, I've got this colour called Earth Green, which is a bit of a weird one. And all I'm doing is mixing it into my orange, pink and yellow. So I've put green, orange, pink and yellow. And what that should do is make a sort of pastel beigey green. Now, Earth Green is made by a company called PBO, which I buy a lot of my acrylic paints for. They're really cheap, but they're very, very good quality PBO. It's like a European make. Now, obviously, if you live in America or Canada or India or Australia, wherever you live, and you can't get them, you can make it. So again, I don't want to exclude anyone. I'm just adding a little bit more orange and pink around the sun, because obviously it's going to be glowing. So a bit like the clouds, we want it nice and warm. Yeah, so it's basically like a sap green with just a little bit of yellow in it. It's not as dark as sap green. Sap green is very dark. So basically any sort of medium green is kind of like Earth Green. It's a very cool name, but it's nothing really special, as I say. So look, all I'm doing is quite orangey. We've added quite a lot of orange to our, and pink to our colour. And that's going to kind of create the glow effect. But it's very pastel still, have you noticed? It's very like greyish. And what that does is, because it's not incredibly bright, it pushes it back off into the distance. Because we want to make our work, even though this is a tutorial for beginners, we want to make our work really realistic. Now as we move towards the left, we're going to just add more green. Look, we're just going to add more green to our mix. So look, I'm just adding a dollop of green. And I'm going to add a dollop of purple. So just like our clouds, purple cools things down. But what it does as well is purple is really, really good at sort of nullifying, if that's the word, as in taking some of the vibrancy, some of the brightness out of a colour. So it kind of like, it's like the guy that you invite to a party that bores everyone. He kind of takes all the fun out of the party. So it kind of takes all the sort of bright panache out of the colours, if you see what I mean. So look, by having it to the left, it kind of looks like it's naturally fading. Now please again dry your painting, because what we're going to do, we're going to add some orange to our mix, our lighter shade, and we're going to go over the top. Let's add a little bit of white so it's not as dark. We're going to go over the top now, a little bit of pink, with some brighter, warm, orangey pink colour, to create a glow effect. So these are going to be the sort of trees that are far off into the distance. We're not really going to have any detail. All I want to do is make them quite lumpy, so it looks like they're poking out from top of that hill. You know, you get sort of like fields and they have like divides, and they have trees that kind of divide areas. And all we're going to do, look, we're going to just come down underneath our sun, kind of spread it with our finger and kind of create a glow. So we, just like the clouds above it, this area is going to be the brightest area. So again, we want people to focus on it. So let's get some more orange, let's get some yellow to create our peach colour, and then let's go over the top in the middle of that. So let's make an even brighter glow. So we're trying to make it nice and pastel. We're trying to have a really, really bright tree line here in the middle. And then we can naturally blend it. And look, we can use the finger technique. What a professional. Look at this. Who needs brushes when you have fingers? So there we go. So now we've got this glow effect. We can sort of put in the detail around it. So let's get a bit of our green. Let's get some of that, and let's put the tree line to the left. So same principle as the clouds. As you move away from the sun, let's do it to the right, you're just getting cooler. So we're going from really warm colours underneath the sun to cooler greens and purples. So let's add some more purple to our green. And then look. So we're getting further away. And we can just make these trees look more cool. So by using this kind of purple, it makes them look grey. Because they're really, really pastel, it makes it look really far away. Whoops, excuse the light. I think I just walked in front of it. And we're just going to paint this sort of area. A lot of this is going to be covered up by our trees, but we just kind of want to have it. And then we can use this colour to create the sort of divides in the fields. So you get these lovely sort of hedge lines. We get sort of, I don't know, like trees and sort of little stone walls to sort of create different fields for different crops and different animals. And again, it just sort of breaks up the painting, just makes it look more realistic. But all I'm kind of doing is just creating sort of like wiggly sort of diagonal lines to imply fields. Now, because they're quite cool, what we want to do, look, we can just get some of our orange, and again we can just go over the top and blend it just so it all transitions, because we don't want any jumps. We always want to make sure everything looks real. But can you see, you don't have to be the greatest painter or drawer to do this. You just have to know these simple lessons. So now look, if I get some orange and yellow and I go over the top a second time, just like the paint on the clouds and the paint on the sky, can you see how much more vibrant it looks from doing it a second coat of paint? So don't be afraid to do that. I'm always for like the easiest option on anything, and I always want to skip steps, excuse me. Your brain naturally wants to do that, but with acrylics, as I keep saying to you, sometimes your work will look so much more realistic if you just go back to it and just keep refining areas. So I'm just colouring over it with the orange areas that I think need to look brighter, and it will make all the difference. I promise it will look so much better. So let's just make this bit a bit brighter. Let's just blend it so there's not so much of a jump. And it should look like a fantastic faraway field. Hooray, look at that. That looks cool. So let's put in our tree line now. So the ones that are really small, they're going to be farther back. And these two big ones are going to be much bigger. So what we're going to do, we're just going to create two different colours. So let's add some purple to our mix and some ultramarine blue to make it nice and dark. And then let's add some burnt umber brown now. So some burnt umber brown to the mix. And what we should do is we should get an off black. Look, it's not as dark as black. It's got this blue and purple in it. But we're going to save this colour for our darkest dark. So these are the things that are closest to the viewer. So why don't we create... We've got lots of this paint. Why don't we take a dollop of it? So let's take... let's keep it for these bushes. And let's take a big dollop of it to the side. And let's make it a bit lighter by adding our cool purple to it. So we're just going to grey it down by adding lots of this cool purple, which was blue and pink, to our mix. So a little bit of ultramarine blue. So we want to make a lighter shade and a darker shade. Now the lighter shade, what we're going to do is these bushes and trees that are off into the distance aren't going to be as dark as the big ones to the right and to the left. But they are going to be darker than the field behind it. So by putting these sort of bushes in with a fine brush, we can imply that they're far back and they're getting a bit of silhouetted because of the sun. So they're quite dark, but they're not as far back as the fields behind them. So we are creating perspective and depths by using different colours. That again makes your work really realistic with not really much skill. So what I'm trying to do, I'm just trying to make them look bobbly, so they're not flat, or my trees and bushes. So just have some different heights and shapes. But so you don't have to be very technical. Just want to imply sort of a hedge line in the background. And then we can get our darker shade. Look, we can get our darker shade. So now we've got the darker one. And we can colour these in. Now these bushes and trees are going to be basically silhouetted, but they're not jet black. So because we've mixed this colour, it's going to look really dark. Look, it looks incredibly dark. I'm just putting the speed up a bit because all I'm doing is just blocking in an area. But they're not quite black because, as I say, black is really, really dark. It's quite cartoony. So by making this colour, to make an off black, burnt umber brown, ultramarine blue is the go-to. That is fantastic for creating a realistic sort of black dark colour for silhouettes. There we go. And while we've got this colour, look, why don't we block in sort of the shadows in the foreground? Now think of, because we want to push those fields back, things that are close to us, they're going to be really, really dark because they're really far from the sun. So they're almost going to be silhouetted. And also this left hand corner, I want to sign my painting in this corner. So I want my corners to be nice and dark. By having dark corners, I can get you to look towards the middle. So all I'm doing, look, I'm just creating sort of like all my really harshest shadows that are nearest to the viewer. I can outline my dirt road. So this could be a country road. Sort of the shadow from the sort of long grass. So let's use that. And what I'm doing, I'm deliberately not going too far towards the middle of the painting. Look, if I show you on this one, I'm going to stop about here. So I'm going up to about the middle of these outlines. I'm not going fully all the way towards the tree line. Let's just have some shadow here. We can even sort of texturize it. And what we're doing, we're laying down these darkened corners to, again, to get you to look towards the sunset. But we're also, if we get the lighter shade now, and we just colour in, this is the same colour as our hedge line, look, that sort of lighter, more greyish, bluey black, it's not as harsh. And then we outline this area, look, and put in our shadows here. What it should do, again, is trick your eyes, and the transitions look really natural because it's a lot less harsh. And if we blend these areas together, you shouldn't really notice the jump. Look at this. And then again, we're just going to create the underpainting. So these are going to be all the shadows. So when we put the grass in over the top, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes, it's going to make it look 3D and really realistic. So again, by laying the shadows first and then putting the highlights over the top, we can make everything look quite real. So I'm just leaving gaps to make it look texturized. And then we can even have like a little bit of a shadow that's sort of cascading from the long grass onto our path to make it again look 3D. And if we've got it one side, let's have it again this side. There we go. So if I zoom out, so we've got all this dry now. We've got our darkened trees that bring them closer to the viewer, and then we've got this nice transition from the sort of bluey grey to the dark sort of off black. So what we can do now is we can dry our painting again. So again, I know it's a bit frustrating, but if you dry it, now if we put bright highlights over the top, it won't get all mucky and mix into the darker colours. So I'm going to get my earth green and some orange. So green and orange make brown. So look, if you add some green to orange, you get kind of like a really nice sort of greeny brown. You can add some ultramarine blue to make it cooler. And this should give you sort of a really nice sort of dark sort of pine tree colour, like a really dark colour. Now, because it's got a bit of orange in it, it's still going to have a hint of heat because obviously the sun is there. But look, again, just like the clouds, if we texturize it and we leave gaps in between for that dark colour to shine through. So look, all I'm doing, I'm leaving gaps. It looks texturized now. because I've left little gaps for that dark colour to shine through. And look, we could do the same on this one. So I'm leaving gaps, I'm leaving bits for that dark colour, and it should look texturized. Do you see what I'm doing? So just think of shadows and areas that are in the dark. We're leaving that colour. We're not colouring in the whole thing. And what you can do now, excuse me, my camera, for some reason, when I was doing this fine detail, was the focus kept going. So I have to show you this very, very quickly. But what you can do is dry your painting and then just get some of the background colour of the sky or the fields, and then just poke holes, just like you did with the clouds, and using a small brush to make your trees look more realistic. Look. But make sure your painting is dry, because you don't want the orange and yellow, this sky colour that I'm just putting in now. You don't want that mixing with the dark green or the light green that you've just done, and you get a big blob of goo. So again, just dry your painting. But sorry it was so quick, that version. Look, if I just get some green and orange, let's make some of the field colour. Look, I'll show you here to show you what I was doing. So look, all I'm doing, look, I'm just using some of the background colour to change the shape of my bushes. So just like we did with the clouds, it's just my lovely camera for some reason didn't want to focus. So when I looked at the footage, so if I show you one of these ones so you can get the idea. So all I'm doing, look, I'm changing the shape of my trees to make them look really realistic by just poking holes in them with a thin brush and using some of that background colour. But as I say, it's so much easier to do if your painting is dry, because if you make a mistake, you can just wipe it away and your lovely painting will be underneath. And also you won't get these colours all mixing together. So by just drying your work, it's so much easier to work on areas, because your canvas is lovely and dry and you don't get sort of a globule of all this stuff mixing together. So look, I'm going to deliberately do one I don't like. Look, so I'm just going to make these gaps, and I kind of don't like that. I don't like this sort of shape of those trees. They look a bit weird. So look, I can just go and get the darker colour again and fill them back in. So I can just get the two shades, the lighter green and the darker green, and just paint them back in. So again, there's nothing you can't change if you do an area and you really don't like it. But the good thing is to experiment. So hopefully with these tutorials, as I say, you're learning things all the time, but also you're having fun with it and experimenting, because you won't know how to do something unless you try. And all I'm doing, I'm getting my sort of greeny purple, and I'm just creating those faraway trees. Now I know where that sort of skyline is and the horizon. We could have a little bit of diagonal bit coming down there to have another bit of, you know, one of those fields. So look, as I say, just like the clouds, if you have to go over it twice because it dries a bit rubbish, that's a simple thing you have to do. Just go over it twice. But look at that, that is looking awesome. So I'm happy with that. So let's get some of the highlight colour that we just mixed, which was green, orange, and a bit of purple, and a bit of ultramarine blue. And let's get a big brush and let's block in over the top of all these shadows. So by using this sort of lighter, sort of saturated green, we can paint over the top. And we're going to leave our dark shadows at the bottom. And this should look like lovely grass. And because that colour we've already used and it's nice and mixed, it should look like these sort of areas are sort of glowing in the sunlight. It's still got some orange, so it matches the time of the day and the glow. So let's just colour this area. Oh, it's all starting to come together now. It's all starting to look really cool. I'm going to leave the corner, the bottom corners, dark because I want to sign it there. So I want it nice and dark. And then I can use a white pen or something to sign it later. So let's block right in here. Don't worry if it's a bit scruffy, we can all neaten everything up at the end. But if you do want to correct things, look, you can just get your outline colours. Any bits you've gone over, you can just fix. I'm just getting some of that green in the middle. Now what I'm going to do, just to make it a bit lighter, I'm just going to get I'm just going to mix the colour again. So it was purple, ultramarine blue and burnt umber to create a dark colour. Now I'd run out of purple here, so I'm just going to get a bit more purple to turn it more grey. So let's get some more purple. So purple, ultramarine, blue and burnt umber to create like a nice sort of grey. And all I'm doing, I'm using a fan brush. Now a fan brush is just a brush that costs about $1 or £1 that looks like a fan. And all I'm doing is I'm tipping it completely upright and I'm just pulling upwards to create the illusion of like a shadow. So I'm just pulling that brush going straight up and I'm just dragging it and I'm just putting in some shades to create the illusion of a shadow. So say you had long grass. Look, I've just pushed it up. I've just gone straight up. Now you don't have to use a fan brush. I just find them easier. If you want to invest in a fan brush, they cost literally £1 or $1. They're so cheap. They're really, really good for creating grass. I'm just going to block in this area because it's kind of like the shadow just sort of cascading next to the long grass. And let's do the same this side. If you can't fit your brush in, look, you can just swap to a little brush for any little areas. And all I'm going to do, look, I'm just going to sort of texturize. Now we've blocked it in, I'm just going to sort of texturize this area. Just try and create some squiggles, just to make it look like shadows in the grass. It's all wet, so I'm just kind of merging everything. And then I'm going to get some burnt umber brown and some ultramarine blue to make it darker again. To make the dark colour we had, the off black. And then, even though it's wet, just in the very corners, I'm just going to make it really, really dark. Because as I say, I just want it really dark. Because that's going to be nearest the viewer. I don't mind if it all mixes together. Once it dries, it will dry darker. So same with this corner. And then we're just going to dry it. Now the reason we're drying it, I've cleaned my brush. I've got a nice clean brush. Is because we're going to use orange and green. So again, by having your painting dry and having a clean brush, you can mix these nice clean colours. So orange and green to create like sort of this tanny colour. And what we're going to do, look, with this texturized brush, we're just going to push down and we're going to create the illusion of some long grass. So the great thing about a fan brush is because its bristles are shaped like a fan, when you push down on it, it sort of creates these weird sort of funky shapes. And it's really, really good for creating the illusion of grass. So all I'm doing, I'm just creating an orange highlight. So a bit like our background fields, these are all the parts of the grass that are getting sunlight. I'm just trying to texturize it. It's going to look scruffy at first, as I say, but we can refine everything in a minute. We just kind of want it to not look flat and dull. So I'm just pushing my fan brush against the canvas and just trying to create the illusion of texture. So we're happy with that. So now we can get a lighter colour. We can get some orange and yellow and a bit of white. And we're trying to match kind of the bottom of the horizon, this sort of orange colour we made right at the beginning of the tutorial. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to use the outer bristles of the fan brush to just poke sort of the illusion of some of the grass getting highlighted. So it's going to look really, really bright. It can look a bit spindly and a bit like spaghetti or something like that. Don't worry, we can always flatten it out with our fingers. We can just blend it. All we want to do, it's kind of like the tops of grass, just getting some highlights. We can add orange to our green, just more orange and green, look, and we can just sort of blend that into the area. So a bit like what we did in the background with the farmer fields. These are the bits of grass that are getting lots and lots of sunlight, so they're getting warmed up. So we're using warm orange. And then we can just add a little bit more green as we come away from the sunlight, so it's more that beigey sort of colour. It's turning more brownish because green and orange make brown. So again, it's the same trick over and over again. We've got the really bright highlight near the sun. we've got the warm orange, and then we've got the sort of medium one. And as I say, you can just smudge it with your finger to make all those sort of highlights not as harsh. So if you're worried that they look a bit scruffy or anything like that, just blend them in. As I say, you can take your time. We're doing this very, very quickly. And then just get some of that cool green just to do the same in the corner. But if you want to at home and you're a bit like precious and you want to do it really photorealistic, as I say, just take your time. Just keep working on it. So done the corners. And look, you can even get a small brush and you can neaten things up. So if it's a bit spiky or scruffy, we can even sort of go around the corner and kind of straighten things. So there we go. So as I say, take your time, don't rush. So what I'm doing, I'm just making those corners nice and bright. I'm just going to now return to the orange. I'm just going to gently blend it. Look, I'm just going to blend it. So try to work again on your transitions. But our sunset landscape painting is really starting to take effect. Just these little finishing touches really do just like bring the painting to life. So that looks really cool. Look. So look, now we've got that in, we can block in our road. Now the road is going to kind of be in the shade. So we want to create like a dark colour. But just before I do that, I'm just going to put a little bit of highlights just on the very tip of this grassy sort of verge in the middle. So this could be like where tractors or like big pickup trucks have been driving along, and it creates sort of like a divide where you get the dirt road and you get sort of grass that sticks out in between. So again, just little highlights with some dark orange and green because we're nearest to the actual viewer. So they'll be getting some sun, but not very much. And then let's get some burnt umber brown. Let's get some white. Now, if you create burnt umber brown and white, you get kind of like a really cool sort of creamy brown colour, like a stony colour. So kind of like this. You can add yellow to warm it up, or you can add blue to cool it down. So look, if I add blue, it turns it more grey. If I add yellow, you can turn it more warm. So all it is burnt umber brown, a little bit of white, and you can add a tiny bit of blue to your mix. So that's just how you can make a pre-mixed colour. And then when you're happy with it, look, all we're going to do is we're just going to block it in. And again, this colour, because it's quite bluish and it's quite dark, it should look like a dirt road in the distance, sorry, in the foreground. And it should look, because it's far away in the distance from the sun, it should look like it's in the shade. So again, the colours should create the realism. So I'm using a little brush. Don't worry if you paint over your shadows, just to get into the crevices, and then I can get a thick chunky brush, look, and I can block everything in quickly with a bigger brush. And what it should do is look like it's in the shade a little bit because of that cool colour. And then we can get some of our orange, tiny bit of that green, and we can sort of glaze over the top. So again, just think the sunlight, just like the grassy verge, we'll be getting some light. So with this path or this road. So all we're going to do, look, we're just going to gently, while it's still wet, we're just going to gently blend it into our sort of earthy, dirty colour. So just like the far off fields, it all matches. You can even blend it with your finger like a professional like me. Or you can use your brush, whatever you find easier. I kind of smudged mine in the middle there, but don't worry, we'll fix it in a minute. And then all I'm doing, I'm just getting the lighter shades, which was orange, yellow and white. And I'm just on the very tip of the path or the road. Again, I'm just making it a bit brighter, just so it stands out more. And I'm just going to blend it gently, coming down. kind of really nice, subtle, and then just going a bit more into that orange. So again, just creating an underpainting. And then now look, we can go back to our lighter of the two colours, so that sort of shadow tone that we had earlier. And I can fix this bit that I just smeared with my finger. Put it back in. I can join up the road just so there's a bit of definition. Some shadows. Colour in that bit. Let's make our hedge line a bit neater. So this could be, do this corner. So say just spending a few minutes just making all these little added details, just what brings the painting to life. So let's do the same on this side. Just use a really small brush, really helps. I don't use really expensive brushes, I use really cheap brushes because I'm always painting, they always get dry out or they get caned because the amount I paint. So I'm just putting in some shadows here. So you don't need to spend a fortune on certain paint brushes, you just kind of need to have a variety. So some big ones, some small ones, things like a fan brush, blender brush. It's so much easier having a small brush. Look, I'm just using the darker shadow tone here in the fore, just here right in the corner. But it's so much easier to do fine detail with a small brush. So just spending £1 or $1 on one makes a big difference, makes your life a lot easier. And look, just doing the same on this side. I'm using the dark shadow just here in this corner. Just linking it to the previous shadow colour, just so it all matches. And if I get a clean brush, anywhere that looks a bit scruffy or something, look, I can just sort of neaten up. Just going back between the highlight colours and the shadow tones. And then all I'm doing here, I'm just getting some of our road colour and I'm just adding a bit of the lighter of the two greys. And I'm just doing some odd pebbles and shadows. So if you want to kind of texturise your road, it's going to look, on camera now, it's going to look really pale, but it's a bit like our sky. Once it dries, it will just give the impression of a few divots and little stones and pebbles, just to give the road some character, just so it's not so plain. So I'm just doing some little lines and little odd dots with a small brush. And then lastly, I'm just going to make my sun a little bit smaller because my giant egg shape that we had earlier. I'm just going round it, and look, just by going round it, it's so much nicer. And then if you want to, this is totally up to you if you want to. I'm a bit pedantic and I'm a bit OCD about my paintings. And all I'm doing is I'm just mixing a tiny bit of that dark grey into my sky colour. And I'm just going to make my corners a bit darker. Now, please don't ruin your paintings at home. Like, I have ruined many a painting doing this, so you don't have to do it. So it's kind of like a gamble. But it's a bit like if you put a filter on your photos, if you're taking nice photos at home. By making the corners darker and the outer edges, it just makes it look more moody and it just makes it look more realistic. So all I'm doing, I'm using some of that cool grey in the corners that I've added a bit of the sky colour to. And then I'm cleaning my brush. So after I've done that in the corners, look, I've just done an outline and the corners. I'm going back to the previous sky colour and I'm just blending it in. And it just gives it a kind of like a nice border. But please, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. And I think she's finished. So I've signed her in the bottom left hand corner. So you've learned how to paint an underpainting to create your sunset landscape. You've learned how to darken your corners and how to have the warm colours around the sun. How to apply that to your clouds. How to paint them. How to have them 3D with the shadows and the highlights and the colours. And then how to create sky holes in them. We've got depths and perspective with colours to push things back into the distance, like these blues, and these darker colours to bring things forward. So you've learned how to paint trees and how to bring them closer to the viewer. And then you've learned how to use highlights and shadows to create really realistic work very, very easily. So I hope you've enjoyed this sunset landscape acrylic painting tutorial for beginners. I've enjoyed it. So please tag me with your versions at mstewartpaintings on Instagram and Facebook, and we can shout them out. I'd love to see your work, so please share them with me, please. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much, and happy painting, guys. Enjoy yourself. Take care. See you soon. Bye.